Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at Morphy's with a Walther P38K. The concept here is very simple. K means kurz, it is German for short. So that's a normal P38, barrel's judged too long, lop that off and presto, you have the P38 short, P38K. Now, Walther did these for real. They're pretty rare, and they made them in the 1970s. There is also another version that you may see referenced that would be World War II period. Those are basically yet another one of those fake Nazi fantasy curiosa sorts of things. Now, I can't guarantee that no SS colonel went to Hans the armorer and said, "Ja, das Barrel ist too long, use the shorten," and made himself a World War II era shortened P38K. Can't guarantee it didn't happen. Who knows? One or two somewhere, maybe. But as a general rule, those are all fake. And you can recognize them pretty easily because the barrel, or the front sight, is generally reset on the back end of the shortened barrel. On the real P38s, the front sight is actually on the slide itself, along with the rear sight. So, if you see a World War II one, it's fake, unless you have some fantastic piece of evidence, proof, like find yourself a picture of the GI bringing it home in 1945, then maybe you have something real. But if you want a real P38K, you're going back to Walther in the 1970s. So let's go ahead and take a closer look, and let me show you what a real P38K is. Let me just give you that comparison one more time, a little clearer here. P38, P38K, this is cut down to a 2.8-inch barrel. Now with that being said, and recognizing that it is in fact marked P38K, and it was marketed as the P38K, they even made manuals for the P38K, it really is an amalgamation of the P1 and the P4, not the P38 actually. So the P1 was essentially just the P38 made with an aluminum frame, and the P38K has that aluminum frame to it. The P4 then was an improvement, a modernization of the P1 that included its most notable feature, a solid topped slide, instead of having the slide cover that you saw on the P38 and the P1. So P38K is really a shortened P4 slide on a P1 frame. It would have made more sense to call this a P1K or a P4K. Why exactly they went with P38K, I can only assume it's name recognition. So interest in this began in 1972. They did a series of very small pre-production batches. We're talking 24 guns at a time for German police, specifically police in Munich and Bremerhaven. And that lasted about 2 years, and presumably they used it, I guess, to finish the concept, but there's not much to this concept aside from cut barrel off and replace front sight here on the front of the slide. In 1974, full production began, and these guns are all in the 500,000 serial number range. So the very last pre-production batch was 500,001 through 500,100. The regular production guns began at 500,101. We have the Ulm proof mark right here, Ulm Proof House proof mark. That HH is a date code for 1977. So you can see they'd only made less than 700 of these between 74 when they started and 77 when they got to this one. And this was imported into the US, so they marked Interarms marking right there, made in Germany, required markings for US import. Now the first 400 or so of these that they made have a number of different features than the bulk of the production. This is a slightly later one. You'd call it a second variation. The early ones, the front sight is typically dovetailed in here, where on the later guns that front sight is a fixed piece of the slide. This guy has an adjustable rear sight, so if you need to zero it, you can do that back here. The early guns sometimes had some different slide markings. They often had wood grips on them instead of the plastic grips, and honestly the wood grips look pretty cool on these. And then the barrel was done a little bit differently. Now what we have here is the major production version. They would make a total of 2,095 of these. Production ran to 502,595. So a grand total of 2,500 guns total produced in the production runs. A couple things to point out here. First off, these use a standard P38 magazine, holds 8 rounds of 9x19 parabellum, with the exception of about 200 of the guns that were made in 7.65 parabellum, which would still use the same magazine. 7.65 parabellum is just 9 parabellum neck down to 7.65. We have a decocker only lever, so that's spring loaded. It does not function as a safety, only as a decocker. The early aluminum frames had a tendency to crack, and so they were later reinforced with this hexagonal pin up here in the front. The second variation of the P38K all have those reinforcement pins, like this one does. And, of course, we have that solid slide from the P4. Disassembly is done just like any regular P38. Open the disassembly lever, slide comes off. We can then pull out the barrel assembly. So this has our locking block in it. That locking lug is going to lock into these 2 recesses in the slide. Really pretty simple. You can see it, you can sort of see it right there. That locking block pivots up, locks the barrel into the slide. When this reciprocates, they're both going to go back together until that pin pushes that locking lug down, then the barrel stops and the slide can reciprocate. This has dual recoil springs just like a P38, the very lightweight aluminum frame. Heel magazine release from the P38, like everything, this whole lower is just a P1 lower, which is just an aluminum P38 lower. There you go. There's the basic field strip on an actual, legitimate, real Walther P38K. I don't know how successful Walther really thought these guns would be. They obviously had some initial interest from police forces, and maybe they were hoping that this would become a big thing, or maybe they recognized that it was a limited market, but it was a really easy conversion from the other stuff they were already making. So even if they only sell a few, why not offer them? Ultimately, it did not turn out to be all that successful. They only made 2,500 of them, plus the handful of pre-series guns. Production ended in 1981. And really the problem is, yeah, it's shorter, but it's still a full-sized grip and action. So it's no longer really suitable to be a service pistol because it has been substantially shortened, but it's also not suitable to be a pocket pistol anymore. Well, still, because the rest of the gun's still too big. So what exactly does this serve? You know, back in the 1930s, Walther had the P38 as a service pistol and the PP or PPK as the concealed carry pocket pistol. That's kind of like, maybe that's the distinction that makes the most sense. The P38K didn't really, although that's part of what makes it valuable as a collectible today, the fact that they didn't actually make all that many of them. So hopefully you guys found this one interesting. Thanks to Morphes for giving me access to this beautiful example of a P38K to show to you guys. Thanks for watching.